everyone. Today I want to talk about the 9 films that are currently playing on the Criterion Channel, February 2021, that are a curated selection of 9 films by the French filmmaker Bertrand Tavernier. I'd only seen 2 of these 9 films before and a long time ago, so it was a real discovery for me, a kind of adventure. I really enjoyed them. I would highly recommend for anyone who has the Criterion Channel to check some of these movies out. Just going to give a general overview. I'm not an expert on Tavernier. There's very little literature on his films in English. I did order a book that covers his films up to 1999, which is good because none of these films are in the new millennium. They're all from the 1900s. And so I'm just going to give some brief comments on all of them, what I thought about them in general. The first one comes in 1974, which is called The Clockmaker of St. Paul. It's based on a George Simenon novel. Now, this is not a Maigret novel. This is one of Simenon's psychological novels. It's Tavernier's first film, and first, obviously, a collaboration with Philippe Noiret, and Noiret would go on to make, I believe, 7 films with Tavernier. It was a magnificent collaboration. Noiret has appeared with many great European directors through the years, and even with Alfred Hitchcock, he has a small role in Topaz. The movie, The Clockmaker of St. Paul, is set in Lyon, and Lyon is the birthplace of cinema, and I believe Tavernier is from Lyon, or at least he lived there part of his life. The Maigret brothers sort of invented cinema as we know it, at least its early days in the 1890s, I guess it was. The story concerns a clockmaker, and he has a small store where he repairs clocks, and he's been a single father. His son is now, I guess, in his early 20s, and he learns from the police that his son has been arrested for murder. He thinks he's had a good relationship with his son, but he discovers that he has not had a good, he knows very little about his son's girlfriend, what his son felt about life. And he now devotes himself to being a devoted and loyal father and trying to justify and understand what his son did in his legal proceedings. It's set in modern times, although I think the novel was written in the 1950s, modern times being 1974, but Tavernier is very interested in history, and many of his films have historical settings, including his next one, 1976, Judging the Assassin. I believe it's set in the 1800s, and it's, again, we have Philippe Noiret playing the judge. Michael Galabru plays the assassin. Isabelle Huppert, in one of her very early roles, plays the judge's sort of girlfriend from the lower depths type girlfriend. The judge being a very rich and ambitious sort of right-wing type of judge. Galabru it's an amazing performance as the assassin. He has taken taken mental problems due to bullets in his brain, and he's released out into the world, and there's no way he should have ever been released out into the world. And there's a political dimension to it, to the film, whereas Tavernier was a member of the Communist Party in the 1960s, and there's sort of critiques. There are sometimes are more implicit than others. This movie ends on a very explicit political dimension of revolutionary times as far as the treatment of workers and especially the treatment of children. The assassin is actually a demented serial killer, and he's basically killing children in horrific crimes, but it's sort of equated with society, with all the children that are dying in mines and in horrible working conditions. The scenery, it's the Ardèche region of France, and it's mountains. In all of Tavernier's films, the locations become a vital part of our enjoyment of the movie. And they film both in winter and summertime, because there's scenes of where the assassin is being chased through deep snow, and then also in beautiful scenes of spring and summer. His next film, Tavernier's next film in this series, is 1980's Death Watch, and this is his first English language film, and it's a kind of dystopian movie. It makes no pretense that it's not being filmed in 1980, but it's a future in which people are no longer ill. They no longer suffer from illness, and there's exceptions, and when there's an exception, it becomes part of in this case, it becomes part of a reality TV show. So the movie is very prescient in the popularization of how people want to see other people's traumas and agonies as a form of entertainment. But it's a very disturbing film, and Tavernier, I think it's fair to say, in his obsession with death, this film may cross the line over into a kind of unpleasantness or morbidness, but it has an incredible cast. It's got Harvey Keitel, Romy Schneider, Max von Sydow, Harry Dean Stanton. I can't say I understood it on a first watch. I didn't understand the themes of the film that much, but I think when you come to Tavernier's films, you're always going to be kind of disoriented. This isn't a clear cut. His movies are not clear cut, especially the historical ones, or in this case, the dystopianness of Death Watch. There's only two of his movies that are, I believe, that are currently available on Blu-ray, and this movie is available from Shout Factory, but I don't believe there's any extras on it at all. And this is a movie that really cries out for extras and some sort of commentary or essays that would kind of put it into some kind of focus. At least on first watch, it's a rather confusing film in some ways. Also in 1980, Tavernier releases A Week's Holiday. Now this is, I think, the first of his slice of life. One aspect of his movies is his interest in historical recreation. The other is in slice of life. Clockmaker of St. Paul sort of has that slice of life feeling, but also it's based on a Simeon novel. This is again set in Lyon at the same moment in time as the Clockmaker of St. Paul, because Philippe Noiret drops by in one scene and playing the character that he played in Clockmaker of St. Paul, so it's the same area of Lyon. It stars Natalie Baye, and she's playing a school teacher who is on the verge of a nervous breakdown. She's been a terrific elementary school teacher, but she doesn't believe, she can't read any more essays. She's burnt out. She thinks the kids are overwhelmed by their addiction to television. 1980 now it would be the internet. And she takes a week off that visits her parents, revisits moments of her childhood and her memories. She has a boyfriend that seems very loving, but she's unconvinced that he's the one and only. Michael Galbraith played the assassin, and Judge of the Assassin plays a neighbor, and she finds friendship with him. He misreads the signs. It's a world in which people are disconnected, and whether they can connect at all, there's always going to be a struggle, or at least a challenge. Next up is 1981's Coup de Torchon. This was the other movie besides Judge and the Assassin that I had seen before. Again, it still stars Philippe Noiret, probably his best performance in a Tavernier film. Isabelle Huppert is back again as his other side of the tracks lover. Stéphane Audran from Claude Chabrol movies plays Tavernier's wife in this movie. It's based on a pulp novel by Jim Thompson, Pop 1280, Populations, Pop standing for population, in which a small town sheriff goes berserk, starts killing people. It's an insane novel. Thompson's books were very insane. He actually was a collaborator with Stanley Kubrick in some of Kubrick's early films. But his pulp novels are really insane, and you feel it. You feel the characters are insane. Perhaps the author is insane. I know Thompson later in life starved himself to death. And in Tavernier is a very cultured, he's not highbrow, but he's a director that is evidently not crazy, and he's tackling subjects, and a subject in which that is the subject, the insanity of a small town sheriff, the conformity of small town America, the stifling nature of life there. But Tavernier, I think, brilliantly brings the story to colonial times, to films in Senegal, and it's the corruption of colonialism that you feel in every frame of the film. But it's sun-drenched. It's one of the greatest uses of location I think you'll ever see, and it has a black comedy mordant kind of wit to it. It's just it's very disturbing movie as well. And if you don't like to be disturbed, I don't think maybe, especially in the historical movies of Tavernier, probably better to stick to the slice of life movies, because this is very disturbing, and you don't really know what to think. He sort of keeps you on balance. Now, I love that kind of feeling when I watch a movie where you're not being forced to feel one way or another. Then we come to 1984's A Sunday in the Country. Now, this is a film that, this is another slice of life historical film, but it's just, as the title states, it's just one day. It's in the life of a very old painter of some renown and much honored. He lives in a small town outside Paris. His son is very dutiful, comes every Sunday to visit him. He has a wife and kids. He's living a bourgeois, non-artistic life, although it's implied that might not have been his first choice in life. And then he's also visited by a surprise visit by his non-dutiful daughter, played by Sabine Azima, who in 1984, I think, had just married Alan Renee. If you've seen any of Alan Renee's later films, she's the star in many of them. And she's sort of the nonconformist. She's not an artist, but she appreciates art. And and the old man allows her to criticize his art and takes it in stride and respects her opinion. She's flighty. She's on the phone to Paris. She's in the midst of a romantic crisis. And there's a scene where she drives a car. She runs a business of some success, and he loves it. He loves to ride around. And this is the early 1900s, so cars were rare, especially in this small village. They go for a ride, and then they go to a cafe, and where there's dancing, and the two of them get up to dance, and it's just a magical moment as the town, who obviously are proud of their famous painter who lives amongst them, admires this generational right of a daughter and a father, elderly, sharing this experience. This the whole movie is sort of has the flavor of a Renoir movie. It's beautiful to look at. I own the Kino Lorber Blu-ray of this film, and this includes a commentary by Tavernier himself, which is it's worth getting this movie just to listen to Tavernier talk about his film. He is very erudite, and even though he has a thick accent, he speaks very slowly, so you can understand everything. It's just how you make a movie and all the little details that go into it. It's highly recommended. The next film, there's three left. 1989, Life and Nothing But. I would say this is probably my third favorite. I would say Sunday in the Country is my favorite, Criterion Channel, and then Life and Nothing But. If I would start with Sunday in the Country, that would be my recommendation. This is another historical movie. It's in the immediate aftermath of World War I. Philippe Noiret again is head of a regiment that is seeking to identify all the dead bodies that are littering the French countryside. Sabine Azima is back again, where she plays the widow of a soldier that's presumed dead. And there's a whole group of people who follow this regiment around because it's so hard to identify, and sometimes they have to, and I guess mostly they have to identify by the artifacts that are found, rings and books, diaries, letters, whatever. So it brings the horror of war, even though there's no war in this movie. It really brings the horror, the long-term horror of war into play. Next comes 1990's Daddy Nostalgia, and this stars Jane Birkin and Dirk Bogarde in his last film role. I think he had already retired, and Tavernier had to persuade him to make another film. He lived I think he's about 69 or 70, Bogarde here, and he did live another 9 years after this. He's retired, living with his wife on the Riviera. They've had a long marriage, but they don't really have anything in common anymore. They just are sort of roommates. And Jane Birkin plays one of their daughters. She comes to visit when she learns that Daddy is been given a terminal prognosis. And she had never had a close relationship with him, and now she's able to, at least for a couple weeks, sort of bond with him and provide some comfort to him, and also for herself, and kind of mourning the fact that they never did before have much of a relationship. I would say that on the channel, both Life and Nothing But and Daddy Nostalgic are of very poor quality. It's sort of like a VHS tape or something you might see on YouTube. All the other films, including the one that I have on Blu-ray, I checked out what it looked like on the channel, and it looks beautiful on the channel. But for some reason, I guess there's been no restorations of those two films, and that's really sad. The last film in this 9-film curated section is 1996 Captain Conan, and this is Tavernier's first collaboration with Philippe Torreton, and they would go on to make several films together, and Torreton wins the Caesar for Best Actor for Captain Conan's story. It's set in the ending days of World War I. It does have battle scenes in it. Captain Conan leads a kind of Dirty Dozen type group of soldiers that probably belong in prison, but during wartime they're sort of an elite squad that goes behind enemy lines. They're bloodthirsty. They take no prisoners. But then the war ends, and then what do people like that do once the war ends, when they've been allowed to kill, and they have a talent for killing. And the history of this is murky. I didn't realize what this history was. It's fairly obscure history, where the troops were not demobilized. They did not go back to France. They're fighting in the Balkans, and they're moved to I guess it's Bulgaria, and the Allied forces following World War I was the time of the Russian Revolution, and these Allied soldiers, these French soldiers, are now facing the Red Army. But there's not any warfare going on, and there is the one battle. The Dirty Dozen of Captain Conan have many of them have been in prison. They're released for one last battle where they can, use their skills, which they do, and fighting the Bolsheviks. Codas are in a few of these films where we see things, how they turn out later, what happens to these people, what happens to people in wartime who seem actually acclimated to war, and what happens to them later, what happens to Captain Conan. It's a very beautiful coda to this film. So that wraps up these 9 films. Again, I highly recommend these Tavernier films. He is a filmmaker who really harkens back more to the pre-French New Wave era. He recently made a TV series and a full-length film. I believe it's called My Voyage Through French Cinema, in which he discusses many of his influences. I haven't seen it yet. I understand the television show and the full-length movie are totally different, but I think the movie, at least, I believe, is available for streaming on Amazon Prime and perhaps elsewhere as well. So Tavernier would go on. He's still with us, and he made many more films, and very few of them are available either for streaming. Hopefully, this series has generated some interest, and especially with the Criterion collection, because Coup de Torchon's DVD has gone out of print. I believe that was the only film Tavernier film they've ever had on DVD or Blu-ray, and they've never upgraded it. So hopefully they'll come out with some. In the meantime, if you want to buy a physical medium, definitely this is the one to get. It's in the country, and probably the best place to start. Okay, that about wraps it up. Hopefully I've been a little bit helpful, and you guys all have a good day, and I'll see you next time.